In addition to the content and all of the information that you are going to have provided for you in Unit 1, Activity 4 on Hamlet, it will take you through Elizabethan theater and Shakespeare himself. The purpose of this video is to guide you through understanding the character of Hamlet, but also leading into what this play is all about. I wanted to make sure, first of all, that you understood what you're to be doing as you go through the play. There are notes that you can click on here and download. On my other computer, I'm able to actually edit those within this link. However, on this computer, I was unable to do that. I quickly want to show you what you can and should do in order to be able to write on those documents. If you would rather print them off or simply make notes, you're more than welcome to do that in your ongoing notebook that you created at the beginning. However, for some of you, having that created is what you want to write on and that you want to save it. So what I've done is I've already clicked on that and I've downloaded it. In my previous video on Oedipus, I showed you how to do this, but I just wanted to review very quickly. When I have a PDF that I am not able to click in and edit, I use DocHub, and it is a Google extension app that you can sign in with your Google account, and it will also save your document to your drive. So I find this very helpful. You may have your own system and you may have a different way of doing this. I'm simply showing you one way in case you have no idea where to begin. So that Hamlet worksheet is a PDF. So I'm going to sign in with Google. I've already clicked on it and I've downloaded it to my computer. So I'm going to sign in with my Google account and then I'm going to click on New. Then I'm going to click on Computer and I'm going to find, I always save things to my desktop because I find it really easy to find it. So I'm going to click on this document because that's what I downloaded it as. And it's going to upload that file for me. So now what I can do is I'm going to click on the text item and simply drop it here. And I'm going to be able to text So I'm just typing in a few of the key things. Now that the great thing is that if I typed out of that, I can extend that so I can include more notes in there. I can fill the whole box. If I wanted to include more in here, I can put that wherever I want to. So quickly just wanted to show you how you can edit that PDF worksheet so that you're able to work through it. So in addition to the worksheet and the information above on Elizabethan theater, there's not a whole, and there's a synopsis as to the play summary as to what Hamlet is all about, which is very, very helpful so that we get an idea of the whole story so that as we're reading through or watching or listening, that we can understand what is necessarily going on. Do I find that this is helpful for all students in order to be able to understand what's going on in the play? Not necessarily. So there's one thing that I'm going to encourage you to do, and I can actually post the link in the newsfeed, in the agenda, if you would like to just look at this and make sense of it. So I taught ENG4U in my class in person last Octomester. And so what I have here is a student created character map. And what a character map is it, one, identifies the key characters in the play. I often encourage students to put Hamlet in the middle because all of these characters are going to be affected by him or interact with him in some way. In each of the boxes, I encourage students to write about what this character is or what they can research and know about this character. And the arrows are how the relationship with these other people, as well as maybe even some of the events that we know in the play so far. This is meant to be done at the beginning of it so that you can become familiar with the characters. You don't necessarily need to know what happens through every single act. It's simply to get to know the characters so that when we're reading through and we see lines by Horatio, that we understand that Horatio is a friend of Hamlet. He's actually the best friend. And that we have some information in the very beginning that we can use to understand more than just who this person is, but how they interact with the main character. For example, King Claudius is actually Hamlet's uncle, who is now the king and has replaced his father, and married his mother. And Hamlet absolutely hates Claudius. And so this is Hamlet's uncle, killer of the king, and Hamlet. And we see that he is going to try and kill Claudius to avenge his father. We also know that because of that incident, that these two do not like each other. So you can either go through the one that I've provided just to get to know the characters and become more familiar with them, or I highly encourage you to get a list of all of the characters in Hamlet and research each one of them and create your own map. This might help create permanence in your brain about who each character is. I know when I was reading through and watching Oedipus that it was really hard for me to keep the names straight. And so I constantly had to go back to my notes. This might be a helpful activity that may help you solidify who each character is so that when you see them on the screen or when you read about them, you know what their position is and you also know how they interact with Hamlet. Character map is not an assessed piece. There is no Dropbox or discussion for the character map. It is simply an activity that you can do to support understanding of the play. The second part that I wanted to introduce to you today is exactly who this guy Hamlet is. And we can do that by analyzing and reading about his fatal flaw. This is the key thing that is driving the play of Oedipus, was understanding what his fatal flaw was. When we look at the character of Hamlet, the key part about this play is that he is a prince, he is of high standing, and he has the world as his oyster. He could do whatever he wanted to do. But we also need to understand who he was as a person. And what we come to understand through the reading of the play of Hamlet is, one, he was maybe more of a sensitive person. He often looks to his father, who has died, who was the king, as a great warrior, and he was known as a warrior who would go off to war and would be the first one into battle, which was not common for the king. You protect the king at all costs. So Hamlet sees himself in comparison to his father as a weakling. Maybe because he's more sensitive. Maybe he doesn't necessarily have that drive. He's never necessarily had to be a warrior, to be aggressive. Or maybe it's just a part of who he is. But what we see throughout this play is that we see this more sensitive side as his weakness. And it leads to a number of other traits that end up being his downfall. One is that he considers suicide because he questions whether or not death would be better than the life that he is living, seeing his mother marry his uncle. And he's missing his father and he's wallowing in grief. And so he wonders whether or not death would be better than life. But here in this act, we see one of his key fatal flaws is his hesitation and his inability to make decisions. Am I saying that he should have made a decision to be suicidal or to commit suicide? Absolutely not, because we're talking about life and death. But this is the very first instance that we see that he flip-flops back and forth, and that when it comes to actually doing something, and we're going to see other examples of that, he hesitates and he doesn't make a decision, and he reverts back to, I guess I'll just somewhat do nothing. And that is what his fatal flaw is. And so when the ghost tasks him to seek vengeance on his murder and to kill King Claudius, this procrastination and the making excuses and the I don't know if I can do it attitude that Hamlet has, his hesitation and not believing in himself, is actually what becomes his fatal flaw. We actually see for a brief moment in Act 4 that he is able to make a plan and that he's ahead of the game, but ultimately it wasn't enough and it wasn't done at the right time. His procrastination is what led him to that place. And maybe if he had acted sooner, that he would have been able to do something. So this is a Prezi that a student has created, and I'll link it in the lesson plan as well, so that if you wanted to go through and review some of those key parts of Hamlet's fatal flaw, that you can do that on your own as well. Again, supplemental information that can help you piece together what this play is about before you watch it, or read it, or listen to it. Another part of Hamlet that is really important to understand is the purpose of the soliloquy. You may have studied this in previous English courses when studying Shakespeare. The purpose of a soliloquy is when a character has inner thoughts or feelings that they express to the audience. It would be really weird to have a character just thinking or appear to be thinking on the stage and not knowing the purpose of that. So it reveals what's going on inside this character's head to the audience. It's like a speech, but it really is meant just for them to fill them in on what's going on with the character and what they're thinking. Hamlet has more soliloquies than any other character in any other Shakespeare play. And the reason for this might be because he is a sensitive guy and he's got a lot going on. And that hesitation and procrastination that becomes his fatal flaw is actually what he's thinking about. He's weighing the pros and the cons and trying to figure out what to do. And this is revealed to the audience to give them more information as to who he is or what he's planning or thinking about. In Hamlet, you will be asked to think about his soliloquies. Later on, you will be provided with an assignment where you go through his soliloquies to evaluate what he's thinking and how that connects with all the parts of the plot structure that was outlined in Elizabethan theater. And so we're looking at the inner workings of Hamlet and trying to evaluate what's important. So I wanted to quickly go through that while you're reading, watching, or listening to those soliloquies that you're thinking about later on, you're going to annotate them or make meaning of them. And I wanted to show you two ways that students of mine have been working through soliloquies to annotate. Remember, to annotate means to make notes in the columns of or beside in order to have notes to go back to and refer to. So here I have a student who preferred paper and pen. And so they wrote out the soliloquy, which is time consuming, but when you don't have a printer, that's what she decided to do, which is great. And so what we have here along the sides are all of the annotated notes. What this student is doing is not just defining what the character is saying, because you can go to No Fear Shakespeare and do that. And I highly encourage, if you don't understand what the character is saying, it is often beneficial to use those tools and websites in order to find the translation. So what we're doing here is more than just looking for what they're saying. And you'll notice it's not every single line. It's parts of it. Remember that we're reading these as one sentence. It may be 3 lines, but it may be only one sentence. And what we're trying to do is get the gist of what's going on here. And that's what this character has written here. I have another student who would rather use Google Docs. And so these will be provided to you as a Google Doc as well as in the text. And what they've done is highlighted, and what you can't see over here that I somewhat covered up were the comments. So highlight and then over in the side making a comment. So all of these parts are really important to understanding the character of Hamlet before you watch, read, or listen this play.